Over 10 years after the original, Avatar: Way of Water made $2.32 billion. That's a B. So everyone is in. There's 5 movies planned. We are on the 3rd, Fire and Ash, and this world is rapidly expanding, pushing boundaries in storytelling and technology and runtimes. To me, this franchise is now more than just a constant expansion of lore, but a piece of proof that blockbusters can still induce life into an audience, and here, James Cameron does it again. Avatar: Fire and Ash follows Jake and Neytiri as they face the most power-hungry and violent threat on Pandora, Varang, the leader of the Ash people, as they all fight for survival. I'm a huge fan of the Avatar franchise, and that's really important to know going into this review, because Avatar: Fire and Ash evolves this series into truly just an epic war film. The structure, the action, and the scale feels like a tale of two sides, this big war that the franchise has been building up to thus far. But to me, by the end of the film, it falls back into just exploring Pandora, which is fine, but we really reach insane heights in the story that led me to expect a much more eventful outcome. That might be my fault, because as the film evolved, I really did think we were leading to some epic conclusion in the final act, but that's just not really the case, thus leading to a fairly underwhelming ending. I do have to mention the really dumb discourse around the runtime of this film. It's important to note that I really do love long, epic, sprawling films. Whether it's action or drama, that's just what appeals to me. And this is exactly that. Now, others might disagree because of how similar this feels to Avatar: Way of Water, but I think in moments that it retreads Way of Water, it might fall a little flat. But by the end, every big action sequence and I guess moving of the plot forward, it feels worth it. And by the end of this 3-hour and 18-minute runtime, I was satisfied by the time I had spent in the theater, and I think all Avatar fans will be. Avatar: Way of Water and Fire and Ash combined for a runtime of about 6 hours and 30 minutes, but really 2.5 of those hours kind of feel like the same thing. It feels like we're treading the same ground, which makes sense. James Cameron originally wanted Avatars 2 and 3 to be one movie, but rewrote it to be 2 separate films, and you can definitely tell. I'll defend the runtime of it all, but I don't think that this is an excuse, because James Cameron has 5 or 6 films planned for this story, and it was his creative choice to split it. I don't really know what he should have done, because a 4-hour movie just wasn't going to happen, but the biggest way this creeps into the film is just that visual and setting beats are really similar to Way of Water, and I think Way of Water really spoiled us with so much new stuff. And since it was 13 years later, it felt like this mass expansion of Pandora that when we get to this film, when we get back to similar visual beats and settings and story points, the lore just isn't really that expansive aside from the Ash people. The Ash people themselves are really interesting, but I think they are kind of underwhelming in their overall impact of a 3-hour film. Varang individually as a character is so interesting, and her relationship with Awa and the difference between her and Kiri's relationship is specifically one of the most interesting aspects of this film. But instead of focusing on just Varang or just Quaritch, I think the villainous aspect of this film succeeds most when it's an exploration of this philosophy that James Cameron so strictly believes in, that humans are a failed species. This is something so hammered in the first Avatar film, but slightly takes a step back in the second film. Obviously, in this third film, we have that exploration on top of the conservationist ideas in the second film and the human colonization aspects of the first film. Thus, being what I mentioned at the beginning of this video, of this long sprawling epic, this war tale that encapsulates the entire franchise thus far on a story and thematic level. Fire and Ash is able to grasp at a completely different thematic straw within our lead characters following Neteyam's death in the last movie, and I think that idea of fate versus faith is so well executed in the small moments that it has.
That's right. Awa will provide. Yeah? So where was Awa? Where was Awa when our son...
Jake!
This new thematically ambitious idea that Jake and Neytiri are kind of fighting on each other against is so ambitious, but it's so unfocused because this film has 10 million different things it's trying to do. Jake is the one that has this crisis of faith, only to realize Neytiri was right all along. And this evolution of their faith and reliance on Eywa is so interesting to see. I just wish we got more of it. One of the most interesting parts of this film is Jake's relationship with the symbol of Taruk Makto and the dark places that he has to go to realize what that symbol really means to him and the people of Pandora. And again, all of these different thematic ideas I love just aren't utilized enough. The narrator of this film changes from Jake Sully to his son Loak, and I think that that was a phenomenal choice. I just don't think they execute on that nearly as well as they could have. The character of Loak and the Payakon don't really take any leap in terms of their character development. There are moments that feel very akin to their characters in Way of Water, but that's really it. We're not making any sort of drastic character evolution. There's not some insane action set piece or emotional moment that really alters their DNA as characters. I didn't know Loak was the narrator going in. James Cameron did talk about it a couple of weeks ago, and when it started with Loak's narration, I was genuinely in absolute awe. I was so excited because I knew, or thought I knew, that something had to change within this character for him to become the main person we're following. That's just not the case. They really don't execute upon any of that, which is why the ending of this film is so absolutely underwhelming. Instead, they decide to focus on two other characters. They take a really ambitious leap with characters like Spider and Kiri specifically. I think Spider's story with Jake and Neytiri, their growth of acceptance, and Eywa's relationship between all three of these characters, phenomenal stuff. People don't really like Spider. I think he's a really interesting character. But Kiri specifically had a lot of interesting lore teased in Way of Water. And this is one character that I think story was worth telling in this third film. It's not necessarily that she's changing from beginning to end, but she really is becoming more powerful. And that is something I think is worth telling in the expansion of the world of Pandora. I'll leave you with this in saying that this film feels like the first action movie of the franchise, because there isn't a main character set, which doesn't work in Loak's favor, but really does work in favor of this being a sprawling war film. After this Mad Max-esque sequence in the first act, James Cameron is just in flow state. This feels like, for the entire runtime of the film, it's the third act. Like, every moment is a peaking moment post Way of Water. There are emotional moments, don't get me wrong. It slows down when it needs to. The final act is very, very similar to that of Way of Water. But the action in this film, the character of Varang and Quaritch and the RDA, everything is at just such a high that this entire movie is just 3 hours of a third act. All this to say, it wraps up in a way that's not necessarily uneventful, but it's not as impactful to the overall lore as you'd hope a 3-hour film would be. Overall, I'm giving Avatar Fire and Ash an 8 out of 10. If you've seen or want to check out Avatar Fire and Ash, let me know what you thought of it in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.